welcome or welcome back. Just a bit of bonus content for you. Just done an interview for a documentary about women's football. Going to attach some highlights on the end here now, or maybe the full interview. Yeah, that was interesting. Good to do as a fan of the game and a photographer within the game. Also, I just want to speak to you about a sort of skill, I suppose, that I'm learning on the job with the sports photography, and that is acceptance. So I've had to learn acceptance, that, sometimes things happen out of my favour, and I just have to accept it and get on with the job, not sulk, not bemoan my luck, whatever. Just accept it, move on, get on with it. So, for example, we had the Birmingham Man United game the other week, and if you've seen that episode, you remember me saying I went in the dugout side, anticipating a Man United goal and running towards the gaffer. So I sat one side of the goal, and the other side of the goal were a pack of photographers. And Ella Toon scored, and instead of coming left towards me, she went right for the photo op in front of the other photographers. I did sulk quite a bit at the time, but I'm learning that I have to just accept that these things happen sometimes. She could have easily gone left, but she went right. That's out of my control. It's an unknown factor. It's just how it is. At Wembley Saturday, I got there in my monopod. The screw on the top broke at the start of the game. And I could have thrown a wobbly, could have bemoaned my luck, why does this have to happen today? The biggest one I've done so far, but I didn't. Did the best I could. Kept it steady, albeit with my finger and my thumb, which are extremely blistered now. But I got the job done. I accepted it. Didn't let it take up any headspace more than about 5 minutes at the start of the day before the warm-ups, and that was that. It's kind of like you hear... I've heard a few football managers lately kind of in interviews using the theory that, like offside decisions or something like that. They say, our season, a 9-month season, isn't going to be defined by this one decision. And generally, over a season, things will level themselves out. So, you might get a decision go against you today that's questionable, but then one might go for you in a few weeks or later on in the season. So with the Ella Toon one, okay, it didn't go for me this time, but I bet there'll be one at some point in the season where the player does run towards me and it levels itself out. So you just gotta roll with the punches and accept what it is, not let it take up headspace, not let it ruin the occasion, ruin the work you're trying to do, and just crack on. Hope you enjoyed the interview on the end. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. And here's to next weekend's video. Don't know quite where I'll be shooting yet next weekend, but I'm sure we'll find some sort of game to photo.
So I'm joined by Carl Newton, women's football photographer. So Carl, if you just want to give an overview of what it is you do and a bit more about what job it is you do.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I'm a massive fan of the women's game. Probably from the fact that I'm a Birmingham City fan, and obviously going back a few years now, our team were fairly dominant in the women's game for quite a while, going back to the days of Mark Skinner, Karen Carney, and others, etc. I found myself in sports photography for a living, and it just so happens the first agency that picked me up are one that covers the WSL primarily, and women's sports, and we also cover everything down to the Women's National League. So, but it's not often I do anything outside of the WSL, and the weekend just gone, I was actually at the England Northern Ireland game at Wembley Stadium as well.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of people there, and as well, as a photographer, being in the grounds often in the last 18 months and further. Since in the last 18 months, have you noticed a rise in sort of interest in women's football, especially in grounds and also elsewhere?
I think there has been by default because of the Sky and BBC deal. But obviously they're pushing it a lot more, and you've got mainstream men programs like traditionally football focus is now hosted by Alex Scott. Soccer AM always feature the women in the goals of the week and stuff like that. So it's being fed through a lot more into the mainstream, which is getting more fans. It was quite bizarre when I started off because we were in lockdown time, so it was a lot of sort of behind closed doors football, which was a bit strange in parts. But sort of this season, since the fans are back, I mean, I did the opening Birmingham City game, which was at the big new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and that was unbelievable to see women fans in following the football, and the grounds are a lot livelier now. I think there's a new generation of fans coming through. The games have been fairly well attended. In my opinion, it works better when they're at the kind of, there's teams that have the odd game at the big ground like Tottenham, but it works better when they're at their traditional hometown like Brentford, because the Tottenham ground is 40,000 plus people, and they had something like a 5,000 gate, which kind of the crowd got lost in. Whereas at Barnet, the 4,000 or 5,000 kind of fills the place, and it feels a bit better.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about attendances, and obviously people coming through in the thousands now for the games. Men's football obviously being a lot more ingrained in society and from a longer period of time. You obviously have diehard fans that have been grown through generations. Do you still see that in women's football, or is it a lot more sort of part-time fans or more reserved fans, or do you have that passion still? Each club
does seem to have its loyal fan base, definitely. I'm seeing that a lot. I'm seeing multi-generations of females and stuff at games. And interestingly enough, I shared a train home from London on Saturday, and I was sat opposite a father and his son. And it's the first time the lad, he could only have been about 6 or 7, had seen any type of football game in a stadium, and it was England women v Northern Ireland women, and he was absolutely buzzing for the experience. So I think it's even sort of crossing sexes and stuff like that now, because people are realising that it's not about men's football, it's not about women's football. Football is football, and the women's game is of a superb standard.
Yeah, and I guess talking more about the standard of football, you've obviously seen a lot of games in your time, just in general, just being there. A lot of the criticism sometimes, and I guess the stereotype surrounding women's football is it sometimes isn't as high a quality. From what you see,
that touted around
quality divide. Yeah, and I guess that is generally that is true. Do you think the quality divide then is as large as it's sometimes made out, or do you think that is generally a myth?
Well, without getting too analytical about it, out of all the games I've shot, I've never shot a 0-0 women's game, which I think says a lot. There's none of this part of the bus stuff. There's none of this conservative stuff. The games are proper attacking, open, expansive games. And on your average weekend of women WSL and Championship football, there's generally a lot more goals than there are in the men's game. And it's a lot more entertaining to watch.
And I guess as well, what do you think moving forward to drive in more fans and I guess just get the sport to a higher level? What do you think could be potentially done to narrow, I guess, that gap in spectators and exposure in women's football?
I think the men's clubs need to get kind of on board a lot more and behind it a lot more resource-wise. I think a few of them have sat up this summer and paid attention because of the money coming from Sky and BBC, so they thought we're missing a bit of a trick here. But we need to get it throughout all the leagues. And I mean, we're seeing some of the clubs on the rise up the non-league system, especially with the restructuring in the summer, that have got kind of famous men's teams names on them. And I know there was Women's FA Cup at the weekend, and headlines included teams like Wimbledon and MK Dons and, you know, other big tag names. So yeah, I think the men's clubs need to get behind it. We need to see more of the TV coverage, more of the integration on TV programs alongside men's football, like Soccer AM are doing quite a lot. And yeah, just more of the same. The game itself, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the standard of football. In fact, as I said, it's more expensive than the men's game, so you're not going to see a crack game of football. It's just about kind of beating these misconceptions of, oh, it's women's football, it's not as good as the men's and all that. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I think it largely does come down to funding and just sort of putting the spotlight on it more. I think that would definitely improve the quality as well. And lastly, in your time following women's football, which player have you seen that's impressed you the most, that you've seen playing and you thought they've got a lot of quality, they're really, really good?
I think you look at, there's two batches for me. You look at the sort of consistency over the last decade. So you look at, Ellen White, Jill Scott, Karen Carney, Alex Scott. You've got Smith as well. So Smith was good in her day. But the current crop, I mean, I'm quite an attacking-minded person. So I love Inabuchi. I love, what's her name, Alicia Lehman, Leah Goldson. And funnily for me, a defender, of all the recruitment problems we had at Birmingham City, Louise Quinn, captain at the back, is a phenomenal player. She is. I mean, we've lost more than we've won this year by about 90%, but damage limitation wise, she's done a superb job at the back.